Bottom boop bottom. My name is Ramirez. This is FrogBear.zil. And today's big idea. Do you want to be rich and famous? I got the easiest trick in the book, my boy. Alright? This is a tried and true method. It has worked for many famous people. Okay, actually, don't do this. I am not condoning this sort of behavior. I am not suggesting this sort of behavior. I'm looking at big ideas. I'm looking at them, I'm looking at politics, dog. I'm looking at some of the oldest things in the book. And when you start looking into some of these things, you start realizing, my boy, it's all cooked against ya. Let's turn on my filter. Because why not? Yeah. I just make myself big that way. I don't know. Kind of miss the other look now. Not gonna lie. Yeah, let's just leave it like that. Who cares? Whatever. Either way, where was I going with this idea? Oh yeah, if you want to be rich and famous. Alright, so something that hasn't been said or clearly stated, in my opinion, a common thread or something that's been recently exposed, something that's been recently highlighted. I'm talking about the last 7 years, the last 7 to 8 years. 7 to 8 years? Give or take 2014. Yeah, whatever. Who cares? In reality, what I'm trying to point out is there is a very large market. It's one of the largest economies that exist that nobody, like, we all talk about it, we all mention it, we all talk about how influential this particular market is, but people do not understand that there's a large market that treats women as a commodity. And by that I mean and I'm not talking about just human trafficking. I'm talking about, look at how some clubs operate. Some clubs will only really allow certain women in for free. They'll tell all the other sweaties or all the other ones, like, hey, nah, get in line. Tell them no, go back, right? Essentially, I'm pointing out that there is a demand, and usually things form together to meet that supply, and so they can meet the demand of whoever wants to purchase this, right? I really want to emphasize that people are not talking about the fact that just in the last 6 to 7 years, we saw a lot, and I mean a lot, of big time players or big time people being the movers or the facilitators of this market, go to jail, come into question of, are they wearing ankle bracelets? Did anything meaningful happen, right? Kevin Spacey. What's the other guy's name? Weinstein. But people also aren't talking about the other aspect of this, which is not just Epstein, but NXIVM. NXIVM was this like pseudo law firm that essentially was trying to help this like Mexican regime kind of take over Mexico. And that's just on the political surface side of things. And, because realistically you also have to account that Mexico by and large is a state controlled by the CIA through means of cartelisms. But ever since the toppling of El Chapo, Mexico is in turmoil. If you look at the mortality rate, it is similar, or probably at this point, probably even greater than the mortality rate of Afghanistan or active war zones. Put that in a pipe and smoke it. The world has developed a very different side of reality, and not a lot of people are talking about that. All of these people share one thing in common: women, and them using women, and in Epstein's case, using children, little boys, all this other stuff, and using them as a commodity, right? Because I'm just using Epstein as a model because we do have records that are in the court now that are proven, undeniable, that say that some of these older women talk about, it's just us coming up front. There's hundreds of other girls that we saw come in and out of that place who We don't know what happened to them. And if you look at the cycle of women who come from broken homes, and if you look into those statistics, it's actually pretty mortifying. Um, Again, things that people aren't quantifying yet. Beyond that, think about how certain strip clubs operate. Think about how pimps operate. Think about how, like I brought it up before, clubs, as in nightclubs, as in having this pseudo culture of promoters that are always actively looking for women, right? And uh, I'm talking about this tongue in cheek in the sense of if it all goes well, we don't. There's a whole other side of the criminal underworld that isn't really highlighted. So I'm just talking about what went well. I think a good story to highlight is some of the people that brought testimony up against Camilla Harris's. Right, Camilla Harris was the one that went after Backspace. Backspace was like this weird website that was kind of like Craigslist, but it had like a special services section, right? And Camilla Harris kind of put the banhammer on this guy. But one of the things that was highlighted that nobody really talked about was how all of these women had to go back into the underworld. And when you're dealing in the underworld and you have no protections, in reality, what ended up happening was a lot of these females had to go back to their pimps or their handlers that would provide protection services. And I'm just kind of like, this is really weird, but this is why I bring up, you want to be rich and famous? Because every single kingdom in the world has always had brothels, or to some degree turned a blind eye to prostitution. Very difficult subject to bring up, but it's one of the oldest fucking professions since the Roman Empire, and it's a market. I don't know what people want me to say or deny about it, but it's a market. People will always look at the fact that there is a demand. How they go about supplying themselves to meet that demand, I'm just saying, nobody really talks about these sorts of things. So I think it's super hilarious that the person who put the banhammer on Backspace and pushed this industry back into the shadows was Camilla Harris. Somebody who you could say suffered from that pimping problem. But very, very weird woo that nobody likes to talk about, which is the commodity market of women, and how there are aspects of our culture, our industry, our infrastructure, our society that will facilitate this need to funnel women into a very peculiar fashion, into a very peculiar areas of the industry. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, right? It's why something that I recently wrote down was real, like if you're a man or if you're a woman, if you're a real 9 and if you're a real 10, your life is sealed. Your fate is sealed. Like you will forever live this really weird perpetual lifestyle that nobody else could live, because right, like you're a real 9, you're a real 10, like you are the fractions of the fractionist of the most prettiest of people. So of course, you get this whole pretty privilege thing, and nobody really likes to talk about that. Nobody really likes to acknowledge that, but it's like, what do you want to say? They get the modeling gigs. They're the ones that get the acting gigs. Like they're the ones that are just that good looking enough that they just get put in the background if they can actually speak their lines or some stupid shit like that, right? And then you get hand models and all this other shit. But that's fractions of people. That's like tiny fractions of people, right? And when you think about the lifestyle of millionaires, billionaires, and people who want to live that party lifestyle, these people, that's a market. That's a giant fucking market that requires women. How do you facilitate that need? And then, I don't know, the way I look at it is, right, I bring this all up to bring up a story about, who is it? It's a family that's friends with Trump. That's why Jared Kushner married Ivanka something. Well, either way, that dude's dad was somebody who would blackmail people using prostitutes. He would blackmail these important people using just normal women. But that was it, right? They wouldn't. That was as far as they went. They would use adult women, and essentially it was kind of like a pseudo brothel house kind of situation, but they got kicked out of the market because somebody else came in and started using children. So what do you think? What blackmail do you think is worse? Some mayor having sex with some prostitute, or the mayor having something with a kid, right? Essentially pricing them out of the market. But he had morals, he had standards, and he didn't go that far. And then you kind of look into the story of Jared's dad's, how he got into jail, and it's shady as fuck. I'm not defending anybody, right? It's all shady as fuck. But we have to talk about that. We have to talk about how there are these decisions that people will make to put people in compromising situations, and we have to acknowledge that. So guess what? We don't live in a civilized society, and we live in a society where people can exercise free will, and however that free will manifests itself is however fucking criminal you want to get. But in acknowledging that, that's just on the small scale, right? That's on the surface level. That's on the level of these people, you can probably see them maybe once driving down the car or something like that. These are normal people. I think there's also more to be said about the upper echelons of that, right? Because these people decide to live in a city, so that's a pseudo-normal lifestyle. You have to remember, there are ecclesiastical classes of people who live at the Pentagon or who have worked their entire lives at the DoD or these super top-level government official areas, that they will live in very particular areas that's just defense contractor people, that's just this, that's just that. So some people will encapsulate themselves in these sort of environments, and again, all I'm trying to bring up is that no matter who you are, there is a cultural programming that will be introduced to the women. I should probably wait. Listening in the chopper. They got me, my boy. Anyway, how long is this? 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Yeah, 12 minutes. Nice. Yeah, but to bring it back home, it's right, I was saying, yeah, look at culture, look at movies, look at the industry. Look at the current trend of decisions that women are making between the age of 18 to 25. And I always talk about 18 to 25 because this is what I call the marketing age, where they are going to market everything towards 18 to 25-year-olds. Once you get to 25, all of the commercials, all of the branding, all of it's not really for you. If you still follow along with it, you still follow along with it. But typically at 25, people will get flunked out of the culture, and men are the quickest to wisen up to it. Let's not even go there. The culture is just, or at least the tone, the way that it is now, and the way that the cultural programming churns out average women, is just it pushes them into partying culture. It pushes them into getting lost and having fun, and getting lost into just it's experiencing life, man. I sucked out freedom, man, and you get into how everybody's being culturally programmed for a specific kind of rhetoric, and I could go on, right? But I don't know, it gets worse when you think about how OnlyFans has taken off, when you look at how Tinder, dating apps have all progressed forward, and just how that aspect is now affecting a large percentage of women. I'm not going to say good, bad, this or that. I'm just saying, you're opening up yourself for decisions. And anytime you do that, you open up these areas where you can set karma, when you can set yourself in a cycle. And by that I mean, having a kid, or exposing yourself to XYZ, or encountering somebody abusive, or this or that, getting kidnapped. Whatever the fuck those avenues open up. I'm not saying any one of these things can happen. I'm just saying that fate, the way lifelines play out, the way I see things, you just open up doors, right? You open up one door, now you got 15 doors, and what decision are you going to make? Because if you go through door number 17, you're about to experience some of the most traumatic shit that you'll ever experience. But at the beginning, it looks nice and calm, right? Like that sort of thing. So, but with women and the way that the market is treating them, the way it looks like to me is women are only flowing in a certain direction, and that's where all the money is, and that's how it's always been with marketing culture, cosmetic culture, dieting culture. Like most, actually, practically all of marketing is always geared towards women first, men secondary, and you can tell that by how most commercials belittle the fuck out of men. But that's a whole other topic. So that's yeah, I think I highlighted it perfectly well. Is just all of these operations, all of these rings, all of these things that facilitated one kind of market, and that's sex. Sex sells. And looking at the trend of Nixium, of Pimpology 101, whatever we want to call it at this point, I think it's important that most people come to acknowledge the fact that there was a very pervasive culture in America that exploited the fuck out of its men, that exploited the fuck out of its women and its children. And how they've replaced mom and dad with the schooling system. The way I think about it now is if university and if college education is so shit nowadays, when all these kids decide to go to university, all I see is people handing off their children to Moloch, or handing off their children to this cycle that everybody repeats, where everybody will expose themselves to the same shitty decisions that everybody else gets to make, leaving them exposed. Not entirely, not everybody will have a traumatic experience, right? Not everybody, right? But that's the exception, not the rule. And in this case, the rule typically is when you expose all these kids to all these open-ended decisions, not everybody has the wherewithal to make the right decisions, especially with the fact of how loans and how all of these kids going to university don't necessarily belong there. They just decided to take the federal loan to see what for their first year is like. Look at the turnover rates between the first years and second years, da 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 da. And I'm more pointing out the fact that this all feeds into this Canaanite system of loan, debt, interest rates, and you being basically a slave to this entire system, this entire ecosystem. And the people who suffer the most, again, are women. Very funny how this system targets and preys on very peculiar aspects of the community. And by and large, the more I kind of... I'm not reading a book. I was reading a blog about Machiavelli. And the description of how Machiavelli describes these families of affluence who use pretty speech and who use their image and brandish like this perception of themselves, all to attract people. Like, he makes the observation that their women fall prey to it. All of the women fall prey to it. And how then that would manifest as anger in the civilians. But now, because it's dating apps, because it's these obfuscated ways of us making these decisions ourselves, right? We make these decisions ourselves, how they've obfuscated that. And don't necessarily tell us how us putting ourselves through these traumatic cycles just churn out nothing but shitty people. And it's why it's important to, like, at least the way I see it, to understand why we should respect women and men. But in a world where nobody takes words seriously anymore, I don't know. You know, we're in a very weird situation at this current time. But I still have hope for the future. I don't know what else to say about this topic. My name is Ramirez, and thanks for watching.